And we're back. Another blazing episode of the Transition Man to God podcast with your host, Rashad McCants. And I'm here with another personal guest, someone that I consider a wealth of knowledge when it comes to everything from education to problem solving. I have someone that I really want to introduce you all to as a jewel, someone who spits that jewelry. Mr. Charles Love, thank you for being a part of this particular podcast, The Transition, as an author, as a New Yorker. Tell us a little bit about yourself, man, and how you got into the education realm and this love of being a cultural reformer.
Man, this is awesome. I truly appreciate it. And I'm a new Yorker, so we'll talk about that. And I think and I think the background is important because and it's interesting when you tell me about the podcast and the reading, you talk about transformations and transcending. And because a lot of people, they're really good at what they do, but I knew what I wanted to do and I honed my craft and I was working to get there. This for me is different. It's more like a calling. And you talk about the importance of problem solving and how I think that's so important. It's seeing a void, seeing something that was being done wrong or something that's not being done at all and saying somebody needs to do, we all stand around, somebody needs to do something about that. Look at that.
Yeah.
And then you look around like, well, nobody's gonna do it. Why aren't we doing it? And that's what kind of happened. So to the New Yorker. So I was born and raised in Gary, Indiana, and never thought I'd end up in New York, but and or doing what I was doing, but just kind of living my life. I grew up like a lot of people in Gary at the time. When we graduated high school, our life goal was to leave Gary. It's like, man, I can't wait to graduation so I can get out of here. Nobody knew what out of here was.
Because Gary was pretty dangerous at the time, was it?
Yeah. So I just turned 50 this year. So I graduated high school in 1989, and from the time I was probably a sophomore till I was 21 or 22, it was the murder capital of the country. Wow. Right. We hear the others now, but back in the late 80s, early 90s, and I tell a joke about how when I started working out in Chicago and I would meet these guys and they were like, "Oh, cool, man, where you from?" And I say, "Gary." And they would like flinch. I'm like, "Dude, you from Stateway Gardens. Why you tripping?" So the reputation was so bad, because it's like anything else, and we'll get to some of that because that changes the perception, which is part of what I talk about. Is Gary had his problems, but it was never. I love growing up in Gary, and it wasn't as bad as people would say it could be in certain areas, just like anything else. But the city as a whole wasn't so bad. But we had gotten this reputation, right? So to the point that people meet you on the street and you seem like a really nice guy. You tell them where they're from, and they're checking for their wallet, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And it's crazy. You don't even think about it when you're in your 20s. Why, but why is that? Or what the negative effects of that can be. So, I left there like a lot of people, went away to school, didn't know what I was going to do, fell into the restaurant industry, and I loved it, because you get the free food, you get to hang out. It's a whole movement, right?
Yeah,
people
yeah.
get off work at 1 a.m. and they just go eat and drink, right?
Yep, yep.
So it was a whole, I was having a great time, minding my own business, and then I started to see the cultural shift. But you shouldn't really pat yourself on the back. But I think I saw it well before anyone else did. And it's not that I'm any smarter or better than anyone else. I think I noticed it because one, I think a little differently. And two, is because most of the people who notice it, either something happened to them personally, so they're reacting, which is human nature, or it's some political thing. Like I'm a liberal and the right was doing this and I got mad, or I'm conservative and the left was doing this. Yes. And as a former NBA player, I think you'll get a kick out of what my transformation was, what made me say I should start paying attention to this. Yeah, and most people don't ask me, so I don't say it that often.
So we jumping into some new territory where we get to understand exactly why, the whys.
The why.
So, people are afraid of the whys. We got to be honest. People are afraid of why. Why is the cultural difference now from Gary, Indiana, different from the 80s? Why is it that the cultural household in the 80s is so different now that can actually affect someone's upbringing, someone's education, someone's reflection of the world. I mean, talk
And
about
think about it. It's not like the problems we had then have gone away. We have the same problems. So I'm not going to pretend that everything's rosy now. Why are you all complaining?
it. Right.
But the problems aren't new. So we back to the solution things. If you're going to look at a problem and say there's a crime problem, a racism problem, a policing problem, an education problem, and I don't disagree with that. But those problems existed when I was a child and existed before then, right? But I don't think there's enough people talking about what you do about it
Yeah.
as opposed to talking about how it is a problem. I have no problem with talking about how it is a problem, but if you spend 82% of your time saying, man, this is bad, let me keep telling you it's bad, and only 12, if that, percent of the time saying, what can we do? Then we're going to become a lost cause, right? Because we're spending more time on the things we can't control and very little time on the things we can control.
Oh man, that's
So,
a big dynamic right there. If you can
yeah,
go into that a little bit more of why that's such a big talking point.
well, it's because it all this, I believe, still goes back to human nature. So it's natural for you to say, you know, that there's a problem and just to keep railing on this problem. Man, I need some money. I need money. I lost my job, or I've been applying and I've been underemployed. So I'm getting jobs, but I got a college degree and they're paying me $11 an hour. I need more money. That's a rational way to think. But the way you get to the 20 and then eventually 40 and then more money an hour and go from bum to billionaires is
Hmm.
to focus on what you can do to change and improve the situation around you. Better connections, go learn another skill. But in a lot of these cases, in this example, people don't say, well, I went to college, I got a degree, but no one's hiring me. Right. And they stop there and they say, is it racism? Is it the way I look? Is it because, I didn't go to the right school? Well, even if it is one of those things, you can't change the school you went to. You already got that degree, right? You can't
Hmm.
change what people think. So what can you shift that you can control? So do you go get a certificate? Do you just change career? I've changed careers twice in my life. Do you do that? Do you take on another job as bad as that is, but do it with the mindset that it's temporary and you have some goal that you're trying to reach? Or do you wake up in the morning and say, it sucks that I make $11 an hour?
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
It's true that it sucks, but which one is going to get you in 5 years to making 20 and then putting you on a path to getting where you want to be? That's what we should be focused on. So I don't do any of this to say people are wrong to complain about the things that happen. They're wrong by not focusing on what part they play in it and what they can control.
Right. So I mean, we talk about cultural, and you talk about education and the educating of the people that are in certain environments that feel, like, you know, I'm from Gary, Indiana. I'm going to be this because this is where I'm from. And I feel like the promotion of the type of cultural deficiencies that exist become more illusionary when you start climbing the educational ladder, you start doing the actual work, and you start seeing what's available to you on the outside. How can we reach the people to tell them what that transition looks like when you start to see that there is fruit that comes from labor, and that we've been told something different down the line, and we're now playing behind the ball because now, the educational pieces that can help us get to where we need to go are being looked at. We're looking down on them instead of looking up on them. Can you talk about a little bit of that educational um, mindset that needs to be implemented in our cultural um, environments to make us, look like we're wanting to do something better for these decisions that's being made?
Right. Well, that's a heavy one because I think that there are things that need to be done and things we aren't doing. We can talk about that specifically to education. But I think a lot of our problem before we get to that briefly is the mindset. The mindset has changed. Like you talk to a lot of Black people, older, older. That's bad. I can't believe I said that. We're old now. We're not old. But no, if you talk to somebody, let's say 40 to 60, They all understand that there's racism, and they would all tell you, when I was little, my mom and dad would tell me there's some white people out here, not everybody, but there's some people out here that want to see you fail. But you can succeed, let's say you're 9, 10, 11, 12. You can succeed. You're just going to have to work twice as hard, right? We've all heard that, right? What we missed that we didn't notice, the difference is if you look at that 30-year-old talking to that 12-year-old today, it's a subtle difference. They're not giving them intentionally a defeatist credo, but they don't say it the same as our parents. They don't say, you can succeed, work twice as hard. They say there's some white people out here that want to see you fail. I'm not saying all of them. So, but you need to go out here and work. But if you do fail, it's not your fault. It's likely that system. You see how that subtle difference there? It's not like they went out there and they said the white man's out to get you. I'm not going to imply that they're saying that now, but they did leave an opening for you to blame someone else.
Right.
And when you get to that, if your mindset is different, it makes it harder when we get to the education piece about the things we can do, what we're doing wrong, what we're not doing. We're still going to have an uphill battle because when we do the things that we need to do, it's still going to help far more kids than doing nothing.
Right.
But we need to do something. When I say culture, I'm saying we've done something to the mindset of a whole generation that they have expectations that are a little bit higher than they should be. They have grandiose beliefs of themselves, like I'm entitled to something, and they're upset about, virtually everything. Let me quickly tell you the example that I said that I noticed that the culture was shifting, because what makes it special is it has nothing to do with race or politics. Me and my friend, we were big into sports. We would watch every sport on TV, right? There's no basketball, football on. We're watching hockey. I used to play tennis, everything. So we're sitting down at his house watching ESPN, and women's basketball comes on, and it's UConn, and I forgot who they're playing, maybe Rutgers. And so, okay, we're going to watch them. They're dominating. They're a really good basketball team or whatever. We're going to watch this game. And I want to say it's 93. And Nikisha Sales is their star player. So she comes out and we're talking because it's the tip off, the game hasn't started. We're talking to each other. And I'm kind of looking at the TV, and I see her come out, full leg brace on. They all hug and shake hands in the center court. She walks to the end, she shoots a layup. And then the other team passes the ball to the guard. She shoots a layup. They meet in the middle, shake hands, and they walk away. And I turn to my friend and say, Andre, look. I say, you see that? And I realized what had happened. And he's like, yeah. So Nikisha Sales was the star player. She was about to break the all-time scoring record at UConn. She was 2 points away, tore her ACL. It's her senior year. She's not coming back. So to be nice and, thank her for all she's done for the university, they gave her the layup. So she was 1 point away. So now she hits the layup and she has the record. And then they give the other team the layup on the other end. So I'm 22 at the time, non-political, none of that thought. But instantly in my mind, I turned to my friend and I'm like, what about the girl that held the record? How is that fair to her? And that's when I started seeing that unintentionally, I know the intentions were good. We're getting to a place where we're like, if we can make people feel good, whatever it takes, it doesn't matter. But everything has a ripple effect. So if I'm the person with the record, I don't feel good. We all, you like the NFL. We all know there's a reason why the Miami Dolphin team, everybody who's still alive, locks arms every time an NFL team gets to 13-0, right? They show up at every game, standing on the sidelines, hoping that team loses so they can hold that record, right? So it means something to them. Yet, if we want the New England Patriots in the year they went, 18-0 or whatever, all the way to the Super Bowl undefeated, there was a lot of people who wanted to see them win just because they're fans. A lot of people that thought it'd be cool for somebody else to break this record that no one else has done. And a lot of people who were focused on Miami. It's like, it's really cool that they care so much about their record.
Right.
So what if we change to a situation where we say, they had it long enough. Who cares about them? Why don't we put our thumb on the scale and let New England win so they can get that record? Now, most of us would say that's not fair, but we don't realize that that's what we're doing every day. Every day we lower a standard. Every day we say it's racist to promote the person with that's the best fit or the best skill, or hire the smartest person or whatever the case may be. Every time we do something like that, we think we're helping because we know that there's been racism in the system and some people just need a leg up.
Right.
But they don't realize the leg up is the opportunity and the skills to create more blacks who can compete at the same level. We do it in sports. Unless you disagree with me and you're the racist and you think that we can't compete academically, we can only compete in physical things, which very few of us honestly believe. So if you think like me, if you're really pro-black, you should be saying, no, give our kids calculus. No, give our kids the standardized testing. And if they don't measure up, let us know that, and we will do what we can to get them up to grade level. But instead, we say, well, if they can't pass the test, just get rid of the test. So even before we get to what we do academically, that became the problem. That's what I saw. And that was before, right after that, we got into the giving everybody the participation trophies and stop keeping score, as if the kids aren't still going to go after the game. It's like, we beat you by 20. I don't care that they turn that scoreboard off.
Because that's what I did.
Because you were the guy that was winning by 20. You would have got beat me by 20, and I felt better because they turned the clock off, so I didn't know. I thought I only lost by 3. And you would remind me, nah, bro. Nope.
We keep score up here, man. We always keep score. If you're a real competitor, you keep a mental score.
Right. And the guy who lost knows. So I don't really think, I understand why they did it, but I don't think that was really beneficial to anyone. And I just say that was, the late 90s and 2000s. It's gotten worse from there. Right. So now we're in a situation. So of course, now it's one bad because we're not giving them, making them mentally tough or giving them the skills they need, but we're also fooling them into thinking they're better than they are. Right. So I'm like, shoot, Sean McCann's one of the best players in the nation. He only beat me by 3. Dude, I can ball.
Right.
I lost. He only beat me by 3.
Well, look, we have to then transition that into the entertainment world. Right. So everything you just said plays the same part in a rapper or actor. Just speak on rapping just for that matter. That is the new education platform for the youth, is the music, because it's learned behavior. And if you go through learned behavior, understand that if this all they seeing, it's all they going to be. So all you seeing is these rappers, someone is saying this. The new slang is the new slang now. This is how they talk and text now. Grown women texting you the letter. Like, we get to a certain point in the culture and you say, where are they learning this stuff from? They not learning that from school. And they seem to be using this more than they use what they're learning in school. So where they spending more time in the classroom with the music and the culture of music than they do academia. And so when you're looking at what's cool and what's not, and I always say this in a lot of my presentations, what's cool is making a lot of money, being famous. What's not cool is being highly intelligent and creating these platforms in which these famous people become famous on. Mm-hmm. Creating.
And what they don't understand is what that gets them, even if everybody won't make it. But in most cases, you're not going to get most of the people who are actually successful. I'm not even talking about the people who didn't make it. Most of the people who ended up following that path and being successful, they don't realize that most of them aren't really rich. Everybody's not going to be Dr. Dre and Jay-Z. Mm-hmm. So some of them will be comfortable. I mean, there's no knock to being comfortable. I'm comfortable. Most people are comfortable. That's really a good goal, to be financially comfortable, right? But they claim they want to be rich. Well, the rich guy is the guy that's paying the guy that's comfortable. Right? So you think, if you get one hit, you rich, but the guy who owns the record label is rich. You think, playing in the NBA, maybe not being the starter or maybe being a starter, making a decent salary is rich. But if you really want to be rich, you might want to own a team. Right.
Because everybody can't be rich. Just like everybody can't be the king. Like there's this notion that we're all kings. No, how would that look?
Right. A kingdom with no serfs gets nothing done.
Come on. How would that look? How would that really look if we were all truly king? We're not. We're all not rich. We're all not supposed to be rich. We all supposed to strive for something, but it doesn't have to be riches.
And success isn't necessarily rich. I think that too many people think that that's the measure of success, right? I mean, sometimes it's your freedom, owning your own business and making $40,000 less than you would working for somebody else, but being able to write your own ticket and travel and do whatever you want to do has a value. Your time has a value, right? So it's not just money. And especially if you grew up poor, you have no idea what rich is. Like, you see rich because you think if somebody can do X, Y, and Z, it's rich. They don't realize that there's plenty of people out here that you'll never know their names. And I'm not even talking about the private jet set, just people who can live in a nice home, big house in a suburb, they can afford a vacation home, all that kind of stuff. And you would never know what they do, right? Because you have a limited view and lens, which is part of my education piece. It's not just what you do in the curriculum, and it's not just how you condition people in the culture, but it's giving people a wider view of the world. Because how can a kid, even if he's trying to do the right thing, dream of being something he's never seen? So he sees the rapper on TV and he sees the cop on his block, right? He sees the doctor that he goes to visit. Okay, that's 3 positions. A couple other jobs. And of course, there's the 5, 6, 7 jobs he sees and he doesn't want to do, right? So he doesn't want to be the garbage man. He doesn't want to be a drug addict. He doesn't want to, he doesn't want to, be a school teacher, let's say. So these jobs he knows he doesn't want to do. And then what he thinks pays well and what he wants to do are like 3 jobs because he hasn't seen them. You think there's people in the hood walking around talking about, when I graduate, I want to be an actuary. But they make good money, but I don't, very few of them are saying I want to be an engineer. There's a lot of great positions out here that they simply don't. Very few of them say, I mean, maybe now with cable news and stuff, but before HGTV and the Food Network, nobody was saying they wanted to be a chef. Right. But these are successful careers. These are people who make decent livings, but nobody knows what that is. So your scope of success and your view of what it means to be successful is so limited that's another area that we need to find a way to broaden.
And it's sad because trying to find the right promotion for such trade skills that are necessities that should be, easily accessible, which, can be easily accessible when you have the ambition for it. It's solely on the promotion. And it's sad that one particular demographic of people promote heavily on one side of the coin. And it has nothing to do with education. It has nothing to do with learning anything. You know what I'm saying? It's more so learn behavior, do what I do, like what I like, buy what I buy. And so we got a lot of different followers now. That's why as Twitter's called followers, Instagram is called followers. You just following. So our education method's gonna have to change if we're gonna start creating leaders. We're going to have to change something in the dynamic where we're teaching leaders. We're not teaching followers to be leaders. We're teaching leaders to be leaders. Leaders come forward, step forward. I want the job, sir. Give me the job, please. There are those who are still a little scared. They want to put their hand up and they need somebody to just push them right over the edge.
Right.
And we got to give it to them somehow. We talking about education. We talking about culture reforming. This is Mr. Charles Love again. Thank you for coming by and blessing us. And I definitely want to get into your book a little bit. That is specifically something that I'm going to dive into. I just purchased on Amazon. You can go purchase his book on Amazon. It is called Race Crazy, BLM 1619 and the Progressive Racism Movement by Charles Love. I want to ask you about specifically the idea of America. What's the premise behind this chapter? And can you unveil it a little bit? Because I feel like in the first couple of pages in the chapter, you dive in, and even the opening, our democracy's founding ideals were false. when they were written, Black Americans have fought to make them true.
That is
Please talk about this for me, man.
well, that is the most detailed, the longest chapter in the book, and I had to take a lot apart. I mean, that's one I suggest people read twice. So the book is about. I'm looking at things from a solution standpoint. So I'm really not getting bogged down in politics. There's no politics in the book, but also understanding that there's a racial element to things that happen in America, always has been. After George Floyd died, it was heightened and everybody was talking about it. I thought the conversations were, to say the least, not beneficial and not leading us to a solution for things. And so the book was kind of about, how BLM says they were founded to focus on police brutality, and then it went away from them. And if you look up what they do and what they talk about, very little of it has anything to do with policing. Then I talk about the 1619 Project and my concerns with the 1619 Project. And in that chapter that you mentioned, it is the longest because it is so I write a chapter on every essay in the 1619 Project, and that particular chapter is the essay written by the founder of the project, Nikole Hannah-Jones.
Yep.
And in it, I say that the project is well written. It is it draws you in. It's like watching a really good movie. You can feel and see and taste the racial animus and the pain and all the things that have happened. And most of them are true, and that's not my issue. My issue with it is that, one, since I am so big on solutions, there are no solutions provided in the project and nothing positive. So it doesn't ring as the whole truth, because a lot of this was about, let's talk about true history, because there's the way history is being taught in school is not the full picture, which is totally true. But then we went the other way and only painted one picture. So it was basically tying everything that happens to slavery. So I just could not, and I read it several times, but I could not get to my line of thinking, which is logic, context, and solutions. I could not get to a place of solutions by saying, so I put myself in the mindset of a 16-year-old Black kid on the south side of Chicago who's reading in the 6th or 7th grade level, doing math at the 9th grade level, right? Struggling to get ahead, dealing with my environment. And how you're telling me, well, you and I both agree we want this kid to have better opportunities and to improve his lot in life. And someone is telling me that what he needs is this wholly negative view of America and a highlight on slavery. And I just didn't believe that. But I wasn't going to negate it because it's true. So what I do is I talk about what she gets right and what she gets wrong and what she leaves out.
Right.
So that chapter is her essay versus my essay. And she talks a lot about her father, which was perfect. So I juxtapose her father and my father, right? Yeah. So your father fought in the military. My father was, I don't remember exactly, 12 years older than her father. So he grew up even before then. He obviously had to deal with similar kind of things. His father was the president of the local chapter of the NAACP. But he never gave us this kind of defeatist, everyone is out to get you mindset. My father was like, there's some people out there and you can't trust them. And some of them are shady as hell. And all of them ain't white, right? So he's like, you like trust but verify. He was like, don't assume that every white person you meet is a racist, but don't assume every brother is your brother, right? You need to be able to assess the situation based on actions and what people say and deal with it accordingly, right? So in her essay, she says, for instance, and I think in the book she since kind of modified the wording, but she says, white people did this, right? And I was like, don't you want to say some white people? Because just like I said with the Miami Dolphins and not caring about their feelings if you want to see New England or some other team break their record, there was some serious racism going on back then. Highlighting it is good. People need to understand it. But when you say all whites, you're negating people who literally died because, and you don't want to give them credit. I look at it like, you're a white guy in a white society. You could, even if you think slavery is wrong, you could have easily said, man, what they're doing to them is wrong, but I'm not going to stick my neck on the line for them because I'm not going to risk my wealth, my comfort, my money, my this, right? And some of them did. Some of them, there's a guy, I can't remember which guy, who literally went broke, spending all his money trying to end slavery. Went broke. He was wealthy, went broke. There are people who they threatened their lives and they had attempts on their lives because they were, printing abolitionist papers. And I say you can teach slavery and teach that, but the 1619 Project doesn't mention that at all because they have something that they have an angle that they're trying to push. They have a belief that they want you to push. And then to the other thing is, I understand human nature, and I think a lot of people don't. So they make the mistake of believing that people are wholly good or wholly bad. Pick one. Like we all fit in this box. So you'll hear a lot of people like Nicole Hannah Jones did it there. She said, like in that quote, that was her quote. She said that the idea of America was false. So what she's saying is Thomas Jefferson writing that all men are created equally, right, with rights divine from their creator. Right. And she's saying that, now listen to me now, it's really important. That is false because the guy who wrote it was a racist who owned slaves. So, you know, I worked in restaurants for years, so I use this analogy. I think people understand better with analogies and stories. So you go out to eat and you go to this restaurant, you get this dish, and it's the greatest chicken dish you ever had. You're like, man, this is amazing. And the chef brings you back and says, I'll teach you how to make it. So he gives you a recipe, he walks you through it, teaches you, shows you a couple times, you get it down pat. It becomes your go-to. Every time somebody comes to your house, you do a holiday party or something, a birthday, you cook this meal, people are like, man, this is the greatest dish ever. Man, it's great. And then a couple weeks later, you find out that the chef is a racist and an anti-Semite, hates Black people, hates Jews. My question isn't, is he a bad person? My question is, does the recipe still work? Wow. Right? Because what you're saying is no one, you got to put it in context. No one in the history of the world before Thomas Jefferson put pen to paper that day had ever said that, you know, our rights don't come from man, our rights come from God, right? So before that, you talked about earlier about we were kings. Somebody had to be the underlings, the serfs, the peasants, right? Right. So before that, everywhere, every corner of the world, it's just what it is. You had people who had power, and everybody else gets to lord that power over them. Here's somebody saying, no, that's not right. That is why it's unique. That is why they don't write this, that every country in the world today that has a written constitution, because there's a few who don't, based that constitution off of our constitution and based it off of those words. That's what we celebrate in America. We're not celebrating him. I'm not going to say Thomas Jefferson wasn't a racist and didn't think that Blacks were inferior to whites, but what he wrote was unique in history. Right. Right. And so the idea was not false. The idea that I am equal to you regardless of your race or your gender is sound, regardless of who wrote it. It's like that recipe. So that is my problem. They want to teach in the schools, primarily in schools where people are already struggling academically, this defeatist thing that, you know, the white man's out to get you. You know, every time you made something, the white man took it away.
It's like the boogeyman. Right?
Yeah. And even when it's true, like I keep expressing it because I don't want people to say, so is she lying? No, but a lie of omission is powerful, especially when you're telling it to 14 to 16-year-old impressionable kids who don't have the context or the wherewithal to go read what you left out. So people talk about, now we had the anniversary and Biden was talking about, people talk about Tulsa. And when he talked about that, I had a lot of white people tweeting at me, like, this is why we need that kind of education, because I went to school and I didn't learn that. It's like, I knew about it and I learned it, and I learned about others. I learned about the whole year of 1919, the Red Scare, when this was happening all over the place. Most people only know about one and two. They were, I don't know, 50 or so. But that's not my issue with it. Learning it is fine. But what they leave out was, you tell me as a Black person who cares about the Black people in the community, the past and the future, how this is a problem. So you want to teach the racist vitriol of the Tulsa massacres, which I agree with, teach it. But they burned down banks and businesses and stole this wealth of these Black people. But you don't want to teach how they got the wealth, right? You had to have wealth to steal it. So in spite of all these Jim Crow laws and all this stuff, this was early 1900s, they still have wealth. But here's the better part that no one talks about.
Hold on. Let's go back. You got to go rewind that back, Charles. You're dropping jewels on dropping jewels. Go back. What did they not? What should they be doing?
So they want to say that these racist whites stole this wealth from Blacks, but they don't teach us how they amassed it. How they amassed it, mind you, in an extremely openly racist society where Blacks and whites were mostly separate, where it was legal separations, right? We were a few short years away from slavery, and Blacks owned banks and businesses and manufacturing, and they were blacksmiths, and they had skills, and they were making money, and they had amassed wealth, and they had employees. They employed the other people in the community who were Black who didn't have these skills or the business acumen, they employed them. So everything was thriving. We were self-contained, and these racist whites came and burned it down. All true. But you never mention the fact that that happened. In the last piece, you also don't mention, most people don't even know this part.
I think you about to drop a bomb on them. Oh shit, go ahead.
They built it back. So after that, 5-10 years after that,
how did they do
had
that?
Black businesses again.
How would they
Black banks again?
How would they be able to do such a thing like that?
Well, I don't know, because they only want to teach me that they burned it down. They don't want to teach you the before and the after. They don't want to teach you that Chicago, Philadelphia, DC, all these big cities had multiple blocks of thriving middle-class Black communities. There were more successful Black businesses in the Bronzeville area of Chicago in 1940 and 1950 than there are today.
How come these people aren't being celebrated?
Right. That's what I say. If you want to teach the slavery and the racism and the things the government intentionally did, which happened, teach it. But by all means, I don't know why most people, like when we were little, we used to know about it. You're probably right on the cusp, you knew about it. I don't think they said, well, they don't teach enough of the slavery and XYZ. You also not teaching Benjamin Banneker, the man surveying DC in the 1700s, right? You're not teaching that. So they teach that, you know, when we talk about immigration, it's all racist. We stole that area from Mexico anyway. But we don't teach that Texas was independent of Mexico and the U.S. for a period. And there were Black men who fought for Texas independence. Some of them were free. People were going there to be free. You don't teach that.
Lost history.
We're not teaching any positive because we're so focused on the negative that the white did, right? We want to highlight the negative of the white. You don't realize that it takes away the positives of the Blacks. You're not teaching that I think if you ask the average person when the first Black person graduated from college in the U.S., I guarantee you more than half of them would say 19 something.
Right.
Not only was it in the 1800s, it was before the Civil War. Before the Civil War. I want to say 1833. Yeah.
Damn.
We forget that we talk about the Black Renaissance. We like these proud Blacks that we love, the Paul Rosens and the Langston Hughes. We love them people. We forget they went to Ivy League schools, you know, except for Princeton, because racist Woodrow Wilson was the president. He wouldn't let Blacks in. But, they loved him for a while. But see, you want to teach it all? I just say teach it all. But what you don't get to do is say the founders owned slaves, even though some of them, a third of them didn't. You don't get to say that they hung Blacks from trees. True. And not mention that a third of the people lynched were white. You don't get to say that Blacks were lynched and shot and killed and robbed and not mention that we amassed wealth. You know, if you're going to teach it all, here's another thing she likes to say. She says that immigrants are, they are successful because of the civil rights movement and the fight for freedom for Blacks. How dare they be suing to get into selective enrollment schools and college and all this kind of stuff, as if the Chinese people didn't come here until after civil rights or until after the I almost said 17th, after the 15th Amendment. But why do the only acts I can think of that actually have a race in them, now we call Civil Rights Act and affirmative action, but they don't say Black, were the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 and the Asiatic Barred Zone Act of 1917. So explain this to me. Simple logic, has nothing to do with race or your level of education, just a little common sense. If the Congress passed a law in 1882 to limit immigration of Chinese people, would they do that if there were no Chinese people coming already?
Nope.
So that means before 1882, there had to be Chinese people here that they wanted to stop from coming.
For sure.
Right? So to say the only reason they're coming is because of our struggle is not true. Native Americans were fighting for their freedom. They fought for their freedom separately, and they just got little inches, peace, and didn't become full citizens until 1924. So there's a lot of bad and a lot of good and a lot of things that have happened. Teach it all, yes. Go into my community teaching my kids that their whole existence, Black culture, is slavery, Jim Crow, and mass incarceration is BS. So I call BS. I will not allow it. And I fight it with every inch of my being, because what that does, it makes you angry. It makes you spiteful. It makes you feel entitled, and it gives you a reason to throw your hands up and say, so what's the point? One of the worst things I heard in the last 10 years Were these celebrities after George Floyd? And I know they had positive intent. They saw something horrific. They thought it was bad. They tied it to everyone, whatever. But you talk about these kids looking up. I want to be a rapper. I want to be an athlete. So I'm 19, 18 years old. I'm avoiding the negatives and pitfalls in my community, trying to survive. And my one hope is to look up to someone like you or someone like LeBron or someone like Oprah or Jay-Z and say, I know it's racist, but they made it. I can make it. Right. So that's my one hope. That's what I'm hanging the positive of America on. That's the one thing. At least I can do that in this society.
Yep.
And then LeBron gets on TV virtually crying and says, we are being hunted. Why don't you all like us? Grammy award-winning artist Gary Clark Jr. says, I'm afraid to leave the house. Right? You say that to that. It's not what you say to me or to you, because we're not going to be affected by it. We know better. We know that's context. But you tell that 19-year-old that, you're stealing that man's hope. You're telling him, why try? You don't think you're doing it, but that's what you're doing. You say, why try? The country's racist on its face.
You're instilling fear in him for sure. It's inciting fear. You're telling them, look, man, they out here hunting you down. Watch out.
Yeah. And if they can hunt LeBron, of course they can hunt little old me. If LeBron, if they can make address is on the Hollywood list of celebrity houses, and we know his schedule and where he's going to be, if he feels hunted, of course I'm hunted.
Yeah. If you can make LeBron feel that way, anybody can feel that way. But ultimately, you got to look at it like this. What are the solutions? Right. Going back to everything that you are about. Yep. What are the solutions to these particular, I call them distractions. I call them distracted because when you go back to the whole African American history and the whole American history, and you try to figure out, for myself, I'm in African American studies in college, and they're not teaching me the whole truth, right? And you're saying, teach us the whole thing. They teaching us the things that put us in victimhood and make you feel like you want revenge when they try to tell you to go watch Roots, and then you gotta go through the slave trade and the whole buck breaking and watching, you gotta go through this as if it's the end all be all of your history, and that's his story. That's not my story. That was his story. And so what the real story is that it's been happening all over the globe for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. Thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years. Slaves have existed. And slaves were not just black people. And that's what this culture generation right now thinks, that the word slave is just for blacks.
It's black, right.
And that's so unfortunate. That they've been convinced, the cognitive dissonance in the people, to believe the history that they have accumulated thus far is the real history, and it's been so diluted and oversaturated with just garbage.
But the real key is what you said. You talk about solutions. What's the end game? In my book, one of the biggest tactics I take in the book is to give them their argument. So that you just assume everything they say is true, and then you say, now what? So let's say it's true for a moment. Let's do it. Every single black person in America is the descendant of a slave. Every one of us. All of us have been redlined, Jim Crowed, separated, undereducated, and hunted, right? So now what? Do we quit? Or if we don't quit and we fight, like many of them will say, what do we fight? Do we fight the evil white man? Because first of all, that means we have to believe that all of them feel that way, and nobody's really that naive. Even the people who make money off of this, they're taking money from whites. Who do you think are paying the people, the pundits at MSNBC, or paying to get Nicole Hannah-Jones the Pulitzer Prize, or Kendi $20,000 to do Zoom meetings at Coca-Cola? If they really believe that, they wouldn't even take that evil white money. So, I mean, let's just set that aside. But who do we go after? I mean, what do we do? What's the action plan of Black America to get over all this negativity and racism? I say it's compete. I say it's teach them what the white kids are learning. Don't let the whites get a better advantage than you, right? So teach them the same math, the same science, the same coding. I say get rid of all of this You talk about it's a distraction, which I agree with. So remove the distractions. I mean, I don't know. You got to take some phones away and some TikToks and some Instagrams away and say, here's a book instead. We need to get them away from this negativity first. And secondly, we need to take back our household and take back our family. I think one of the things I talk about that the conservatives get wrong, where they act a lot like the left, not to get much political, but they do like the left do. They point out a problem and then they get to the edge, get right to the good point, and then they walk away. So it doesn't even matter if they're right, because you don't give me a next point. So they point out the high percentage of single family homes that kids grow up in the Black community, which is true. And do I agree that it'd be better to have both parents in the house? Yes. But we're here now. If I'm going to say to the left, but that kid in the 11th grade is already reading 3 grades behind. So saying racism over and over again, even if racism got him there, it's not going to solve the problem.
Right.
I have to say the same to conservative. Saying that 74% single family household is bad isn't enough, because that's what we are. So you're not talking about what we do. So what do we do? Right? There's things we can do. We got plenty of billionaires and millionaires on the left and right. So it doesn't matter what your beliefs are, free market or government control, left or right, doesn't matter. All of you got money. Where are the mentorships?
Right.
You're trying to tell me if I went into a single mother's home and say, look, I know you're struggling, you got 2 jobs, whatever. We're going to take your 14-year-old for 20 hours a week. It's not an after-school hoops program. This is real deal. We're going to take them in for 4 days a week or 5 days a week for 4 hours a day. We're going to give him different trainings. One day, we're going to make sure he caught up on his math and science or whatever he's doing at school. It's just all homework and tutoring. Another day, we're going to match him up with a Black businessman and have him learn about whatever that business is. Third day, we're going to take him out of the community and let him see those actuaries and those other jobs I talked about that they've never seen. Take him away, let him see, broaden his horizon. And the next day, we're going to do something else. So you telling me that parents be like, nah, I don't really want you doing that. I'd rather them sit at home and watch TV all day. Of course not. So the parent would be okay with it. We got the money to do it. Why aren't we doing it? We're saying these kids don't have the same opportunity to get high SAT scores because the wealthy white parents cheat and pay for all this prep to get their kids, prepared. Well, why don't we just pay for prep for our kids? But the kids' parents are poor. Well, we can pay for it. Why don't we raise the money to do it? There are tangible things we can do, but what we're doing is saying, well, Black, well, race, well, Black, well, racism, well, systemic, well, the government, well, incarceration. Well, some of the incarceration, especially the sentencing lengths, may be due to racism, but racism didn't make you shoot anybody.
No, you can't never allow that narrative to be an excuse for someone making a stupid decision. And when it comes down to it, politicians need to be asked that one question: how are we gonna fix it? You got to ask the politicians the questions when they get in there talking about what they're gonna do. How are we gonna fix it?
Everybody's complaining about this year, right? This is a perfect example. Trump was horrible. Whatever they say about Trump, okay, he's gone. Biden started this year off. Think about it. Nobody talks about this. He started the year off talking about, racism is important. All this stuff is better. Racial equity. So I'm going to make the whole of my administration, every department, from the Department of Interior and the national parks to the military, wholly focused on racial equity. All right, we're almost at years in. How that playing for us, bro?
Crickets.
It ain't better. Oh, well, it's only been a year. It hasn't kicked in yet. Okay. Keep thinking that. The problem isn't Biden, to be honest. The problem isn't his intentions. It's the fact that they don't understand human nature. And they think they can police, one, what white people believe. If I'm a white racist, I'm going to be a racist regardless of what you do. I might even double down and get more racist and more violent and more aggressive. And two, you can't bring in, it's like you and I talked before, we were talking about the problem with the community and getting jobs is people make the mistake of starting on what I call the third rung of the ladder. They say, we need jobs in our community. No, you don't. You need skills. I can open a company tomorrow and say, hire now, and put a sign in the window, now hiring 500 people only from this zip code. How many of them are going to fail the drug test? How many of them are not going to be able to pass the written test? How many of them aren't going to show up at all? How many of them will come with a whole bunch of attitude and say, well, if I asked you to do this, would you do it? As part of your job? I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. I ain't cleaning toilets. I'm not doing this. Why don't I get in office? How many people will we be down to? That's just facts. That's not anti-black. It's not happening because it's black. It's happening because you haven't prepared them. Well, I would say if you went to Western West Virginia or certain parts of Kentucky and did the same thing, you'd have the same results. Only the skin color of the people would be white.
Well, you just have to. You gotta look at this. Look at the spending power. The spending power is all about the money spent. And if you want to talk rich, who makes rich people rich? The consumers, the people who consume. And the biggest consumers on the planet are who? We are.
Especially as a percentage of our income, without a doubt.
Our spending power is tremendous. So we can't say that we don't have. We spend more than everyone. We spend more than everyone on things we don't need, on liabilities that don't mean anything to us. So therefore,
immediate gratification. Nobody wants to sacrifice.
The people we make rich are the people who are just monetizing off of the ignorance of the misinformation of how to spend money, how to use money, how to use credit, how to get out of debt. You know, these are things that are just fundamental things that are taught to these, people who have the money. They teach their kids. That's what the generational wealth is, teaching the kid what this stuff means so that they don't have to learn it in school or depend on it while they're in school. They know the transition from college to the real world is all about a two handshakes and a conversation with an uncle or a friend from a friend, and everything's done because we already know the business. My dad's been in the business. My uncle was in the business. Granddad was in the business. Everyone knows something. That's why you think of why the gang violence is the gang violence, because it's traditional, it's generational. My dad was in it, my uncle was in it, my cousin was in it. Everybody been in it. I'm in it. I'm in it by default because they was in it. The guys see me down the street like, yeah, you such and such cousin. Yeah, you with us now.
Right.
So now we at a standstill when we talk about transitioning. We've transitioned from trying to educate to educating, and we've transitioned into looking at the cultural differences to now having a cultural balance. And then ultimately seeing that America has been seen in one dynamic, and the reality of it is it's a whole different dynamic when you just look at green and you don't look at black and you don't look at white. You look at opportunity, you look at what you can do, skill sets. Take away the victimhood, you take away the excuses. Are you really applying yourself to transition into a place where you can transform into something that you've never been, which allows you to transcend into something that you've never done, which is become a billionaire, become a millionaire, become a thousandaire. And these things are not just monetary. These things are metric points of a journey, of an adventure, things that also accumulate into self-success. So as we end the podcast, I want to thank Charles for coming on board, man, and giving me and the audience all of this information and jewels on education, on culture, and specifically on how we see and live in America currently and in the past historically, and the solutions that need to be implemented and considered. And I would love to have Charles back, man, because there's so much to unpack here, man. But Charles, I'd like to thank you again for coming on board, man, and giving us your tidbit here at the Transition Man to God. Any last words? You want to throw out your social media handles and tell the people where to find you, how to get to you?
I appreciate being on it. I mean, it's always great talking with you. We can go for hours. Well, I'll keep it simple. Twitter is CDouglasLove3, or you can just go to the website, thecharleslove.com, and you can find appearances and radio show and all that kind of stuff.
No doubt. And so again, everybody, I want to thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Transition Man to God podcast. I'm your host, Rashad McCants. Thanking you again, Mr. Charles Love, for joining us on the show. And to the new listeners out there, thank you again. Tune in. We out.